What it was like to be a knight during medieval times. When we think of knights during the medieval times, we think of valiant men who chose to defend their honor in feats of jousting, chivalry, and dragon slaying. But that's not exactly how it was for the actual knights. Jousting wasn't always a part of the culture of being a knight. Chivalry was less of how to be a gentleman and more of a list of what not to do. And dragons weren't real, no matter how much we wish they were. Today, we're exploring what it was actually like to be a knight during medieval times. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Good History channel. Oh, and while you're there, leave a comment and let us know what topics you would like to hear about. So gather ye at thy round table, and together we shall commence. There weren't a lot of options for other religions, so almost everyone that lived in medieval Europe was Catholic, or at least they claimed to be. Everyone from kings and queens to the lowly peasants and serfs were expected to take part in their religious duties, be it yearly or daily. Knights were certainly included in this, and they were known to start their days with a morning mass at their local church. Nowadays, we would say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But back then, feeding the Christian soul was considered more important. That was part of their moral code, just like the other code, a sort of antiquated man code. The code of chivalry was also one that was adhered to. Most of us think chivalry is something that can be found in a Nicholas Sparks novel. But the code for knights was less, reminding them to hold doors open for the ladies and more to keep belligerent knights in line. And just keep him in here. Until you or anyone else. Not anyone else. Just me. Just you. Get back, get back. Though there were rules of things to do, like live for honor, protect the weak, and respect the virtues of women, there were far more rules of what not to do. Things knights were not allowed to do as declared by the Code of Chivalry included beating up priests, taking someone's cattle or other livestock, hurting women, setting fire to homes, or robbing, kidnapping, killing, or doing any sort of general harm to random innocent people. These are rules that we can all generally agree meet the bare minimum of what would fall under the umbrella of chivalry. Nowadays, everyone is always trying a new diet fad, but medieval diets did not include keto, paleo, or Atkins, and they most certainly never had a meatless Monday. They never had a meatless any day, since meat was the primary ingredient in most meals. While most meals consisted of meat and bread because it tasted good, it also was because they thought most vegetables were poisonous. It's a classic saying that one bad apple can spoil the barrel, but it sounds like back then, someone ate the wrong kind of mushroom or put some poison ivy on their salad. So all vegetables were out of fashion. Beware of green salads and raw fruits, for they will make your master sick, was a common saying at the time. Meat wasn't cheap in medieval times, and since there was no Oscar Mayer bologna to eat in a pinch, the lowest on the economic scale ate pork. That'll do. Pig. That pig will do. However, since knights held an elevated social status, they had access to higher quality food than the average serf or peasant did. Beef and sheep were often served to knights along with cheese. Since food needed to be kept safe to eat, a lot of it was pickled or had been preserved with salt, which would certainly make someone thirsty, which is why, if they didn't have a croaker handy, you had better believe they didn't have Evian. So without unlimited access to clean water, the people of medieval times mostly drank alcohol because they knew it wouldn't be contaminated. Well, we don't have the same excuse today. The medieval knights drank like frat boys, and that often led to worse behavior. All these men drinking beer all the time, they most certainly weren't playing beer pong or flip cup. And this rowdy behavior could sometimes get violent and rather ungentlemanly. Of course, they couldn't drink too much mead, which would fatten them up. Because contrary to what you might think of the traditional manly stereotype a knight conjures in your imagination, That's right. Image was everything. And since no one was getting likes on their Instagram pages, they had to settle for likes the old-fashioned way, compliments and adoration. But fashion wasn't as straightforward as it is now. There were laws placing restrictions on what people could wear. Under sumptuary law, ordinary people were forbidden from spending a lot on their fashion. This cap was instituted to stop peasants and serfs from dressing better than noble people, like knights, so that everyone could be identifiable by their outward appearance. So knights had to wear nice clothes to distinguish themselves from the lower class. They did this by wearing more elaborate designs and nicer materials, as well as emphasizing the crotches with large codpieces. Yeah, that's right. With no sports cars to compensate, size mattered back then. No matter how they dressed, the knights still had a job to do. But what was that job exactly? Well, part of their responsibilities included serving in their lord's private military. In some places, like England, knights exclusively protected the king, which effectively made them the national military. Other places, like France, allowed the nobles of the community to recruit knights to protect them, making them more like bodyguards. Regardless of who they served, knights were expected to fight for and carry out the orders of whomever they swore an oath to, just like Brienne of Tarth, only with a slightly bigger codpiece. Sure, being a knight was a profession, but they generally only worked roughly 40 days a year. Like a lot of modern jobs, there was a certain hurry-up-and-wait attitude. Being a knight essentially meant being on call, being ready to go into battle or escort their lord. On journeys were expected, but in reality, these duties were painless and over quickly. Knights had to be on top of their game when they went to battle, but they also had to make sure they were always ready to go, and that came from participating in tournaments. This started as them competing in melees, mock battles, where they would fight for prizes. Eventually, those evolved into jousting matches. This later turned into glorified equestrian pageants called carousels, which you will recognize from your years of not wanting to ride it at amusement parks and carnivals as a child. Someone has an issue with carousels. Tournaments weren't open to just anyone. They were exclusively for men of nobility. It was a great honor to participate in them, so no one ever left their invites unread. This was something that they chose to do if asked. Since they had plenty of time being on call, knights had lots of opportunities to compete in tournaments and to earn a little extra dough. They also had more time to court the ladies. Over time, the supply of knights shrank because not every knight could emerge victorious in battle. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look, just a flesh wound. Tony Stark had nothing on medieval knights. With their imposing armor, a knight looked impenetrable, and it was for arrows that were fired in their direction. But the life of a knight in battle wasn't all arrow dodging. For the rest of their duties, the full-body armor weighing roughly 60 to 110 pounds was not very practical, because they may as well have been carrying an entire friend dresser on their back. This armor slowing down the knights is part of the reason many historians believe that some armies in the 14th and 15th centuries could have won several major battles had they been wearing less bulky protection. They would have been more agile, more energetic, and generally faster than the other armies buried under similarly burdensome armor. Eventually, the lesson was learned, and in the 16th century found the soldiers trading in their stacks of armor for attire that allowed them to be more mobile. If you've been struggling with what to do with your life, take comfort in the fact that modern medicine allows you to live over triple the life expectancy of people in medieval times. With less time, they had to decide quickly on what their life's purpose was. Because most people made it to about the ripe old age of 30. Training to be a knight could start as early as 7 years old, so that meant they could spend the next 14 years of their lives training. During those years, they worked at being strong and impressive warriors. These years were spent on horseback, learning archery, and mastering the sword until they were proficient. A lot of training montages later, and they would be ready to achieve knighthood at the age of 21. At this time, they would go through a dubbing ceremony, where they would pledge their loyalty to a particular lord. Bonus points if they decided to write their lord's names on their new notebooks with hearts drawn next to it. Since this was the age way before Apple TV, the nights were spent communally, as knights and noblemen found ways to entertain themselves. Drink. Generally, the after-dinner entertainment came from a minstrel, a servant first employed as a castle or court musician. Some were known as bards, although we don't know if any knights were lucky enough to be regaled by that bard. You know which one. But the knights were often treated to ballads or long poems based on myths or legends. Bravely run away, away. I did a. The knights would spend a lot of the nights entertaining each other because knights didn't exactly get a good night's sleep by our standards. Instead, they would sleep in shifts. Some might get to sleep for half the night and then wake up and pray, right? Or if they were really lucky, have sex. But someone had to stay up and keep watch. Most of us these days would prefer to sleep for the whole night. But it appears that their interrupted sleep schedules weren't dangerous for them, unless this was affecting their 30 years life expectancy. Who was to say? The life of a knight wasn't all battles, and it wasn't all pageantry. But it was great work at the time if you could commit to it at an early age. So what do you think? Would you have liked to be a knight? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our good history.